The Valdrix Imperial War Academy was the most famous military school in the galaxy. For 3,000 years, it had trained the best warriors from dozens of alien species. The academy sat on a frozen moon called Keth 7, where the temperature never rose above freezing. Only the strongest and most skilled cadets could survive the brutal training. But in all those thousands of years, the academy had never accepted a human student. Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and felt the cold air hit his face immediately. His breath came out in white clouds as he looked around the arrival area. Everywhere he turned, he saw tall Valdrix cadets walking past him. They were huge, at least 7 feet tall, with thick scales covering their bodies. Their reptilian faces showed clear disgust when they looked at him. Jake stood at 6 feet tall, which made him feel tiny next to these massive warriors. The Valdrix were known across the galaxy as the ultimate soldiers. Their scales were so tough that bullets bounced off them. They could move twice as fast as most other species. Their entire culture revolved around war and fighting. They were born warriors, raised from childhood to be the best fighters in the galaxy. Jake was only here because of politics. Earth had recently joined the Galactic Coalition, and the coalition leaders wanted to show that all species were equal. They had forced the Valdrix to accept one human cadet. The Valdrix military leaders had agreed, but they expected the human to fail quickly. Everyone knew that humans were weak, slow, and fragile compared to real warrior species. Humans were good at science and business, but they were not soldiers. Commander Vexral stood before the new cadets in the main training ground. He was the head instructor at the academy, and his reputation was legendary. His golden eyes swept across the formation before stopping on Jake. The contempt in his gaze was clear. Undries, you are here because your species bought a seat at the table, Vexral said, his voice cold and harsh. But we do not lower our standards for anyone. You will be tested in ways that will break your body and mind. We train in zero-gravity combat. We push your bodies to the limit. With high-gravity endurance tests, we run tactical simulations that will fry your neural pathways. We use live weapons in our training exercises. The commander paused, letting his words sink in. 60% of all cadets fail in the first month. They wash out, go home, and never return. Given your weak human body, I estimate you have maybe a 5% chance of surviving the first week. Jake said nothing. He had learned long ago that talking was useless. His father had been a military instructor in the Earth Marines. His mother had been a combat medic who saw action in 3 different wars. Jake grew up understanding that humans might not be the biggest or fastest, but they had other qualities. The galaxy was about to learn what those qualities were. The first real test came just a few hours after the welcoming speech. All the new cadets were taken to a massive arena called the Pit. Here, they would face the Gauntlet, a series of brutal challenges designed to separate the weak from the strong. The obstacles were designed to test even the mighty Valdrix warriors. First, there was a tall wall that cadets had to climb while automated guns fired at them. The shots were not lethal, but they hurt badly. Next came water tanks filled with freezing liquid. Cadets had to stay underwater for 3 full minutes without breathing. After that came spinning platforms that rotated so fast they created crushing gravity that could rupture internal organs. Finally, cadets had to fight hand-to-hand against combat drones programmed to hurt them. When Jake's turn came, all the other cadets stopped to watch. They wanted to see the weak human fail. They expected it to be entertaining. Some of them were already laughing. The buzzer sounded. Jake started moving. What happened next surprised everyone watching. The human did not try to match Valdrix's speed or strength. That would have been stupid and impossible. Instead, Jake used something that humans had perfected over thousands of years of warfare on their dangerous home planet. He used efficiency and intelligence. When he climbed the wall, he did not rely on raw muscle power. Instead, he used momentum and leverage. He planned each hand and foot placement carefully. He moved in ways that required the least energy. The automated guns tracked him, but Jake had already learned their firing patterns in the few seconds of watching. He moved between the shots, with careful timing. In the water tank, something interesting happened. Jake's body reacted in ways the Valdrix did not expect. His heart rate slowed down automatically. This was called the mammalian diving reflex, something humans inherited from their ancient past. It let him survive underwater longer than his lung capacity suggested. On the spinning platform, Jake used a breathing technique that human fighter pilots had developed centuries ago. It was called hook breathing, and it prevented blackouts during high-gravity maneuvers. The Valdrix had never seen anything like it, but it was the combat against the drones that really shocked everyone. Jake fought with calculated violence that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primitive. He did not try to overpower the drones with strength. That would have failed. Instead, he watched them carefully, identified their weak points, and attacked those specific areas with brutal precision. He destroyed each drone efficiently, wasting no movement, making every strike count. It was not pretty or honorable fighting. It was practical and deadly. When the test ended, Jake had completed the gauntlet in the top 15% of his entire class. He limped out of the arena, bleeding from several wounds, but he was still standing. He had not quit. He had not failed. The other cadets stared in silence. This was not supposed to happen. The weak human was supposed to break immediately. Commander Vexral watched Jake leave the arena. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something unexpected when looking at a human. It was not respect. Not yet. It was something else. It was the beginning of concern, maybe even fear. The commander had seen thousands of warriors train at this academy. He knew talent when he saw it. And what he had just witnessed was not normal. The human had not succeeded through strength or speed. He had succeeded through something the Valdrix did not fully understand yet. Jake Morrison had succeeded through pure human stubbornness and adaptability. The weeks after the gauntlet were designed to destroy Jake Morrison completely. The Valdrix Academy did not believe in starting slow or being gentle with new cadets. From day one, students were thrown into advanced combat situations. They were expected to learn through pain, failure, and sometimes even death. The medical technology was good enough to bring cadets back from most fatal injuries, which only made the instructors push harder. Jake's roommate was a Valdrix named Kex Tor. For the first 2 weeks, Kex Tor barely spoke to the human. He treated Jake like he was invisible. But after watching Jake survive several exercises that killed 3 other cadets, Kex Tor started to get curious. The human should not be alive. He was too weak, too slow, too fragile, yet somehow he kept surviving. One evening, they were cleaning their weapons in their shared room. Kex Tor finally broke the silence. "How did you know the Krellic war form has a weak point behind the third arm joint?" he asked. Jake looked up, surprised that his roommate was actually talking to him. "I didn't know," he said honestly. "But I noticed it favored turning to the right side. That meant either the left side was stronger and it was protecting that side, or the left side had some kind of weakness. So I tested both ideas until one of them worked." Kex Tor's eyes widened. "You were willing to die just to test an idea?" "I was willing to accept pain to gain information." Jake corrected him. "There is a difference. Death is permanent. Pain is temporary. Knowledge lasts forever." This conversation changed things between them. Kex Tor began watching the human more carefully during training. What he saw was disturbing. The instructors had been right about one thing. Humans were definitely weaker than Valdrix. They were slower than Krellic warriors. They had no natural armor like the Thaxons. But humans had something else. Something stranger. They never stopped analyzing everything. Every fight, every training exercise, every simulation. Jake was constantly gathering information. He was forming patterns, testing theories, building knowledge. The Valdrix fought using instincts that came from millions of years of evolution. Humans fought using something different. They had turned warfare into a science. In the 5th week, the cadets were divided into 2 teams for a tactical simulation. The scenario was simple. Defend a colony against an invading Krellic force. The Valdrix cadets immediately organized themselves the traditional way. They established a defensive perimeter, created kill zones where they could shoot enemies easily, and prepared to hold their territory. Jake suggested a different approach. We cannot match the Krellic in a straight fight, but we know they rely on pheromone communication to coordinate their attacks. What if we find a way to contaminate their signals? We could make them confused and disorganized. The team leader was a Valdrix named Torvash. He laughed at Jake's suggestion. You want to fight a battle with chemistry? This is a warrior's academy, not a science laboratory. We fight with strength and courage, not tricks. War should be fought with every tool available, Jake replied quietly. My people learned that lesson the hard way, over thousands of years. The team ignored his advice completely. They fought the traditional Valdrix way. The simulation ended with the defending team being completely overrun in just 40 minutes. It was a total disaster. Commander Vex Rahl reset the simulation. Then, to everyone's shock, he put Jake in command of the defending team. What happened next would be studied in military classes for years to come. Jake did not try to hold ground like a traditional defender. Instead, he scattered his forces across the entire colony. He ordered teams to hit enemy supply lines. He had them poison water sources with chemical compounds that would confuse the Krellic sense of smell. He turned the colony itself into a weapon. Every building became a trap. Every street became a killing zone. Every shelter for civilians hid snipers, waiting to strike. The Krellic invasion force was designed to win through overwhelming numbers. But they found themselves fighting an enemy they could not find, could not predict, and could not understand. When they entered buildings, explosions killed them. When they advanced down streets, snipers shot them from hidden positions. When they tried to coordinate using their pheromones, false signals sent them to the wrong locations. The simulation lasted 6 hours. Jake's defending team won with minimal casualties. The attacking Krellic force was left scattered and broken. The debriefing room was completely silent when the simulation ended. Nobody knew what to say. Finally, Torvash spoke. That was not honorable combat. That was dirty fighting. Yes, Jake agreed calmly. It was survival. Where I come from, honor is something you give to enemies who show mercy. But survival always comes first. Always. Commander Vex Rahl studied the human with new eyes. There was something he needed to understand. Tell me, Cadet Morrison, how many wars has your planet Earth fought? Jake was quiet for a moment. We stopped counting after we reached 10,000 different wars. We have been fighting someone or something for our entire recorded history. We fight each other. We fight our environment. We fight our own planet. We fight diseases, famines, and extinction events. Everything on Earth is constantly trying to kill everything else. We learned how to fight before we even learned how to speak in complex languages. The room was dead silent now. Everyone was listening. You see, Jake continued, the Valdrix fight wars for honor, for territory, for resources. Those are noble reasons. But humans? We fight for something more basic. We fight for the simple right to exist. Every single day, we fight against a planet that has spent 4 billion years trying to kill us. You evolved as apex predators on a world that was relatively kind to you. We evolved as prey animals on a world that wanted us dead. He paused, making sure everyone understood. We did not become apex predators through strength or speed. We became apex predators through intelligence, endurance, and absolute refusal to give up. We are persistence hunters. We chase our prey until it collapses from exhaustion. We do not need to be faster. We just need to be more stubborn. Kextor spoke up. That explains your tactics. You do not try to win quickly. You try to make the enemy lose, slowly. Exactly, Jake said. We make war into a long, grinding process that favors the side that can endure the most. And humans can endure almost anything. Commander Vexral felt something cold settle in his stomach. The implications were staggering. The Valdrix had built their entire military philosophy around individual strength and honorable combat. They believed that warriors should face each other directly and fight fairly. But humans had built their military philosophy around something completely different. They believed that war had no rules, except one simple rule. Win at any cost. Use every advantage. Exploit every weakness. Never fight fair unless you have no other choice. The galaxy had invited humans to join the Galactic Coalition, thinking they were a weak species that needed protection. The galaxy had enrolled a human in its Harshest military school, expecting him to fail and prove human weakness. Instead, they had revealed something terrifying. Humans were not weak. They were just playing a different game entirely. A game they had been perfecting for 10,000 years, while the rest of the galaxy was still learning the basic rules. That night, several instructors met with Commander Vexral in his office. They were concerned. The human was teaching other cadets his methods. Kextor was now questioning traditional Valdrix tactics. Even some of the instructors were starting to wonder if there was value in the human approach. We need to understand what we are dealing with, one instructor said. This human is changing how our cadets think about warfare. By the third month at the academy, Jake Morrison had become a serious problem. Not because he was failing, but because he was succeeding in ways nobody had expected. He had formed a small group of cadets around him. Kextor was part of this group, along with a female Thaxon who had started calling herself Lisa. She had adopted a human name as a sign of friendship and respect. This small group began winning every tactical exercise they participated in. But they were winning using methods that disturbed the traditional Valdrix instructors deeply. They used psychology against their enemies. They employed deception and tricks. They fought without any sense of honor or fair play. And most disturbing of all, they never lost. Not even once. The Academy's fourth-year cadets were considered the elite. Their leader was a Valdrix champion named Vox Krill, who had won every combat competition for 3 years straight. He was fast, strong, and skilled. He was everything a Valdrix warrior should be. Vox Krill was furious about the upstart human and his team. They were making a mockery of traditional warfare. He demanded a special exercise, a chance to crush Jake's team and remind everyone that Valdrix supremacy was based on real martial skill, not cheap tricks. Commander Vexral approved a war game. It would be simple. 2 teams of 20 cadets each would face off in the Keth 7 wilderness. This was a frozen wasteland full of ice canyons and forests made of crystal. The rules were basic. Capture the enemy flag and bring it back to your base. The exercise would last 72 hours, 3 full days. Jake's team was completely outmatched on paper. His 20 cadets were mostly first and second-year students. Vox Krill's team was entirely composed of fourth-year cadets, the absolute best warriors in the academy. Everyone expected Jake's team to be destroyed quickly. The exercise began at dawn. Vox Krill's strategy was simple and brutal. Exactly what you would expect from traditional Valdrix tactics. Advance in force, destroy any resistance, take the flag. It was the Valdrix way, and it had worked successfully for 3,000 years. Why change what worked? But Jake had no intention of fighting them directly. That would be suicide. On the first day, Vox Krill's team marched into the ice canyons, expecting to find defensive positions. They expected Jake's team to dig in and fight. Instead, they found nothing. No defenders, no traps, nothing at all. Just empty ice and silence. Vox Krill was confused but confident. He ordered his team to push forward, deeper into enemy territory. On the second day, things started going wrong. Scout teams stopped reporting back to the main force. Not because they were attacked or killed. They were simply getting lost. Someone had marked false trails in the ice. Someone had obscured all the natural landmarks. Someone had created a maze where none had existed before. The temperature began dropping even further than normal. Localized weather patterns were shifting in strange ways. Equipment started malfunctioning for no clear reason. Food supplies were spoiling faster than they should. Water sources were contaminated with chemicals that made the Valdrics sick. By the third day, Voxkrill's team was exhausted, scattered across miles of wilderness, and completely demoralized. They had been walking for 3 days straight. They were cold, hungry, lost, and frustrated. And they still had not seen the enemy. Not even once. Meanwhile, Jake's team had spent 3 days doing what humans do better than any other species. They made their environment work for them, instead of fighting against it. They had built shelters that trapped heat efficiently. They had identified ice lichens that were edible and nutritious. They had created a supply network across their territory. They were warm, fed, rested, and ready. When Voxkrill's scattered forces were at their weakest point, Jake's team finally struck. But they did not attack with honor. They did not announce themselves or fight fairly. They used ambush tactics. They attacked in the darkness. They shot from long range. They used methods that seemed to come from something ancient and terrifying. Small teams of Jake's cadets would hit isolated groups of Voxkrill's warriors, then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. They used hit-and-run tactics. They created the illusion that they were everywhere at once. They made Voxkrill's team paranoid and afraid. The exercise ended with Jake's team delivering Voxkrill's flag to their base with 16 hours to spare. They had won decisively. Voxkrill's team was found scattered across 50 square miles of frozen wilderness, exhausted and defeated. Some of them were suffering from hypothermia. All of them looked traumatized. The debriefing after the exercise was brutal and angry. Voxkrill slammed his fist on the table. "You fought like cowards. You never faced us in honest combat. You hid in the shadows like prey animals." Jake looked at him calmly. "No, I fought like a human. You see, Commander Vexral asked me once how many wars Earth has fought. I gave him a number. But I did not explain what that really means." He turned to address everyone in the room. "We did not just fight wars. We perfected them. We have studied warfare for 10,000 years. We have written entire libraries about tactics, strategy, psychology, logistics, and supply lines. We have fought in every type of environment our planet offers: dense jungles, burning deserts, frozen tundra, high mountains, deep oceans, and massive cities. We have fought with rocks, with swords, with guns, with bombs that can destroy entire continents." Jake paused to let that information sink in. "You train warriors to be strong and fast and honorable. Those are good qualities. But we train soldiers to win by any means necessary. There is a big difference between a warrior and a soldier." Commander Vexral stood slowly. His voice was serious. "Explain that difference to us." "A warrior seeks glorious combat," Jake said. "A warrior wants to test their skills against a worthy opponent. A warrior values honor and tradition. But a soldier? A soldier only cares about one thing: victory. A soldier will use any method, any tactic, any weapon that leads to winning. Honor is optional. Survival is mandatory," he continued, his voice steady and calm. "You have built your entire military philosophy around individual strength and fair combat. That works fine when you are fighting enemies who follow the same rules. But we humans built our military philosophy around something different. We built it around collective efficiency and adaptable brutality. You fight wars. We have weaponized the very concept of war itself." Kextor spoke up, supporting his friend. "The human is right. We were taught that there is honor in direct combat. But Jake taught us that there is wisdom in indirect combat. Why fight an enemy at their strongest point when you can attack their weakest point instead? Another cadet from Jake's team added, "We did not lose our honor in that exercise. We simply redefined what honor means. Is it more honorable to die bravely, or to live and protect what you are fighting for?" The room erupted in arguments. Some cadets agreed with the human approach. Others were disgusted by it. The instructors looked uncertain and troubled. Commander Vexral raised his hand for silence. When everyone quieted down, he spoke directly to Jake. "If I may be direct with you, Cadet Morrison, your academy teaches cadets how to be excellent at fighting. Is it true that Earth teaches something different?" "Yes, sir," Jake replied. "Earth teaches how to be excellent at winning. And after 10,000 years of constant practice, we have gotten very, very good at it. We have turned it into a science. We have made it predictable and repeatable." That night, Commander Vexral sat in his office for hours, thinking about everything he had witnessed. Finally, he opened his communication terminal and began writing a report to Valdrick's High Command. The message was marked as urgent and classified at the highest level. The subject line of his report read simply, "We have made a terrible mistake." In the body of the report, he wrote, "We believed humans were weak and unsuited for warfare. We were catastrophically wrong. Humans are not weak. They are the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, precisely because they do not fight like warriors. They fight like something else entirely. Something we have no defense against. Something we do not fully understand. We invited them into our academy to prove their inferiority. Instead, we have given them access to all our tactical knowledge, all our strategies, all our weak." The news of Jake Morrison's victories spread through the academy rapidly, and then beyond it, to the wider galaxy. Within just a few weeks, military observers from the Galactic Coalition began arriving at Keth 7. They wanted to see the human cadet in action for themselves. What they witnessed left them deeply disturbed and confused. During one observed training exercise, Jake's team was given what seemed like an impossible scenario. They had to defend a space station against an overwhelming attacking force. They had limited ammunition and no reinforcements coming. Traditional military doctrine said to hold the most defensible position, fight as long as possible, and inflict maximum casualties before the inevitable defeat. Jake completely ignored traditional doctrine. He evacuated the entire station. Then he booby-trapped every corridor with explosives. He vented the atmosphere in strategic sections to create impassable zones. He hacked into the enemy's communication network and fed them false information about where the defenders were located. He led his small team in a fighting retreat that turned into a guerrilla campaign through the surrounding asteroid field. The attacking force won by capturing the station. But the station exploded the moment they took control of it. Meanwhile, Jake's team had seized the enemy's supply ships and gone on the offensive, attacking the now stranded enemy force from behind. The exercise had to be terminated early. The observers did not know what to say. This was not warfare as they understood it. A Krellic admiral named Thexvorn approached Jake after the exercise. His face showed clear disapproval. "What you did was not warfare. That was terrorism. That was criminal activity disguised as military tactics." Jake looked at him with genuine curiosity. "What is the difference?" "Warfare has rules," the admiral said firmly. "It has honor. It has protocols that civilized species follow. What you did violates all of those." Jake nodded slowly, thinking about this. Those rules were created by species who could afford them. You are stronger than most of your enemies, so you can fight them fairly and still win most of the time. But humans? We are almost always the underdogs. We are smaller, weaker, slower than most species we might fight. We learned very early in our history that you cannot afford honor when you are fighting just to survive. You use every advantage you can find. You exploit every weakness in the enemy. And you never, ever fight fair unless you have absolutely no other choice. That is a terrifying philosophy, Admiral Thexvorn said quietly. It is what kept us alive on a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us, Jake replied. It is not terrifying, Admiral. It is necessary. You do what you must to survive. Everything else is luxury. Everything else is luxury. But the real turning point came during Jake's final examination at the academy. The ultimate test for graduating cadets was a command simulation. Each cadet was given control of a fleet in a battle scenario that was designed to be unwinnable. The goal was not to win, because that was impossible. The goal was to see how the cadet handled command under impossible circumstances. Most cadets fought bravely until their fleet was destroyed. The very best cadets managed to save a few ships through tactical retreats and clever maneuvering. Jake Morrison did something that nobody had ever done before in the 3,000-year history of the test. He won. The simulation placed him in command of a small coalition fleet facing a massive Krellic armada. He was completely outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched in every way. The Krellic fleet was positioning for their final devastating assault when Jake did something that shocked every observer. He surrendered. The simulated Krellic commander, confused but pleased, moved his entire fleet in close to accept the surrender and board the coalition ships. Jake's ships powered down all their weapons. They lowered their defensive shields. They opened their docking bays as if ready to be boarded. The Krellic fleet approached confidently, ready to claim their prize. Then every single human ship detonated its reactor core at exactly the same moment. The massive, coordinated explosion created an electromagnetic pulse that disabled every Krellic ship in the area. Their systems went completely dead. They were floating helplessly in space, unable to move, unable to communicate, unable to defend themselves. In the chaos and confusion that followed, the escape pods from Jake's fleet regrouped. These pods had been quietly launched minutes before the surrender, carrying all the personnel to safety. The crews from these pods then boarded the crippled Krellic vessels, took control of them, and flew the entire enemy fleet back to Coalition space as captured prizes. The simulation ended. The room where the observers were watching erupted into chaos. Some people were shouting in anger. Others sat in stunned silence. That violates every single rule of warfare. Someone yelled. You cannot fake a surrender. That is a war crime. It violates the rules of your warfare, Jake said calmly. But those rules do not exist in human military doctrine. We only have one rule. Win. Everything else can be negotiated or changed, depending on the situation. Admiral Thexvorn stood up slowly. His voice was quiet, but everyone listened. Do you understand what you have done? Cadet Morrison, you have just shown the entire galaxy that humans do not play by our rules. You have demonstrated that everything we think we know about warfare is incomplete. You have proven that humans are willing to sacrifice everything, including honor, including their own lives, to achieve victory. Yes, sir. Do you know what that makes you? The Admiral asked. Jake met his gaze without flinching. A nightmare. To anyone who might fight against us. The Admiral nodded slowly. Indeed. Which is exactly what the Coalition needs right now. We have been fighting the Krellic Empire for 6 years, and we are losing badly. We are losing because we fight with honor and rules while they fight with overwhelming numbers. But you, humans, you fight with something else entirely. You fight with pure calculation and willingness to do whatever is necessary. He turned to address Commander Vex Ral directly. I am making an official recommendation. This human should graduate immediately with full honors. He should be granted the rank of Tactical Advisor to the Coalition fleet. We desperately need his perspective and his methods. More than that, I am recommending that Earth be formally invited to open its own military academy. We need them to begin training Coalition officers Inhuman warfare methods. Commander Vex Ral's face was difficult to read. You want to teach the entire galaxy to fight like humans? No, Admiral Thexvorn said grimly. I want to make absolutely certain that the galaxy never has to fight against humans. Because after watching this cadet for 3 months, after studying his methods and his thinking, I have reached one inescapable conclusion. If humanity ever decides to go to war with the Galactic Coalition, if they ever decide we are their enemy, we will not stand even a small chance of winning. They will destroy us, not through strength, but through methods we cannot predict or defend against. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was processing this terrible realization. The weak species from Earth, the species that had been accepted into the coalition, almost as an act of charity, was actually the most dangerous military threat in the entire galaxy. We thought we were doing them a favor by letting them join us, another officer said quietly. We thought they needed our protection. Yes, the Admiral agreed. We were wrong. They do not need our protection. We need protection from what they could become if we ever made them our enemy. Over the next few days, official decisions were made at the highest levels of coalition government. Jake Morrison was graduated from the Academy with unprecedented honors. He was given the new rank of Tactical Advisor. Earth was invited to establish military training facilities on coalition worlds. Human military instructors, many of them veterans of Earth's countless wars, began preparing to teach alien officers. The galaxy was about to learn how to fight like humans, and the Krellic Empire, which had 6 months after graduating from the Valdrix Academy, Jake Morrison, stood in the command center of the coalition flagship, Valiant Dawn. Around him, officers from dozens of different species worked at their stations, preparing for what would be the largest military offensive against the Krellic Empire in the entire history of the war. Jake wore the uniform of a coalition tactical advisor, a rank that had been created specifically for him. It was a strange feeling. 6 months ago, he had been just a cadet that everyone expected to fail. Now he was helping plan major military operations for an entire galactic civilization. Admiral Thexvorn walked over to where Jake was standing. Are you ready for this, Advisor Morrison? This will be your first real battle, not a simulation or training exercise. Jake took a deep breath. As ready as anyone can be for their first real combat, sir. I have studied the plans carefully. I believe they will work. The Krellic will not expect what we are about to do, the Admiral said with satisfaction. They have fought the coalition for 6 years. They think they know all our tactics and strategies. That is exactly what we are counting on, sir, Jake replied quietly. They are expecting us to behave in predictable ways. Instead, they are going to get something completely different. The battle began exactly as the Krellic forces anticipated. The coalition fleet jumped into the system through faster-than-light travel and immediately began forming a standard attack formation. The Krellic responded with their usual tactics. They brought in massive numbers of ships and prepared for a brutal frontal assault. This was how every major battle had been fought for years. But then the coalition fleet did something that had never happened before in any previous engagement. They retreated. Not a slow, fighting retreat where they tried to inflict damage while pulling back. This was a full, panicked rout. Ships broke formation completely and fled in what looked like total chaos and confusion. The Krellic commanders were surprised but also excited. They smelled victory. They ordered their entire fleet to pursue the fleeing coalition ships. This was their chance to destroy the coalition's main battle fleet and win the war. The Krellic fleet chased the coalition forces directly into what appeared on their sensors to be a debris field. It looked like the remains of some previous battle. Just floating wreckage and destroyed ships. The Krellic slowed down, being careful in the dense field of debris. But they were still confident. The coalition fleet was trapped ahead of them with nowhere to run. Then the debris field came to life. Every single piece of what looked like wreckage was actually a camouflaged drone. Thousands of them. They had been placed in position over the past several weeks by human special operations teams that had infiltrated the system in stealth ships. The drones had been powered down completely to avoid any detection. Now they activated all at once. The drones were not powerful enough to destroy Krellic warships directly. They did not need to be. Instead, they had been programmed to target very specific systems. They attacked sensors so the Krellic ships could not see. They attacked communication arrays so the ships could not coordinate with each other. They attacked engines so the ships could not maneuver. Within just a few minutes, the entire Krellic fleet was blind, deaf, and unable to move. They were completely helpless. The coalition fleet, which had never actually been in retreat, returned in perfect formation. They methodically destroyed the crippled enemy ships one by one. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The battle that everyone expected to last for days was over in less than 3 hours. It was the first truly decisive coalition victory in 3 years of losing the war, and it had been achieved not through superior strength or better ships, but through deception, patience, and the kind of strategic thinking that only came from humans. In the weeks that followed, Jake worked closely with coalition officers from many different species. Together, they began implementing what was now being called the human doctrine. It was not just a new set of tactics. It was a complete revolution in how warfare was understood and conducted. The human doctrine had several key principles. Use misinformation and deception as primary weapons. Turn the enemy's strengths into weaknesses through careful analysis. Never fight fair, if you can avoid it. Treat every battle as a problem to be solved rather than a test of courage or honor. And above all, remember that the only goal that matters is victory. Earth began establishing military training facilities on 3 different coalition worlds. Human instructors arrived, many of them veterans of various Earth conflicts. They began teaching alien officers about concepts that the galaxy had never really considered before. Guerrilla warfare, where small forces could defeat large armies. Psychological operations, where you attacked the enemy's mind instead of their body. False flag tactics, where you made the enemy attack the wrong targets. Asymmetric combat, where you never fought on the enemy's terms. The Krellic Empire, which had been steadily winning the war for years, suddenly found itself fighting a completely different enemy. The coalition no longer fought in predictable ways. They did not hold territory or defend fixed positions. They struck at supply lines and communication networks. They spread misinformation and created confusion. They turned every battle into a situation where Krellic's strength and numbers became disadvantages instead of advantages. One evening, during a brief break from operations, Commander Vex Ral came to visit Jake on the flagship. The old Valdrix looked tired and thoughtful. They sat together in an observation room, looking out at the stars. "Do you understand what you have done?" Vex Ral asked quietly. "I changed the balance of power in the galaxy," Jake said. "We are finally winning the war against the Krellic." "Yes, that is true," the commander agreed. "But you have done something more than that. Something larger and more significant. You have made war itself more terrible than it was before." Jake looked at him, waiting for him to explain. "Before you came to my academy," Vexral continued, "warfare in the galaxy was brutal, but at least it had structure. It had rules, honor, and limits. We knew what to expect from our enemies. We understood how battles would be fought. There was a certain predictability to it, even in the chaos of combat." Crossless, he paused, choosing his words carefully. "But now warfare has become what you humans have always known it to be. It is a science of death and destruction, perfected over thousands of years. There are no rules anymore. There is no honor. There is only the question of who survives and who does not." Jake was quiet for a moment. "I know. And I am sorry for that. I really am. But the alternative was losing to the Krellic Empire. That was not acceptable. Sometimes you have to do terrible things to prevent even more terrible outcomes." "Perhaps you are right," Vexral said. But you must understand something, Jake Morrison. The galaxy will never see humans the same way again. You came to the Academy as a curiosity, a weak species that everyone thought needed protection and guidance. You left as something far more frightening. He looked directly at Jake. You have proven that humans do not need to be the strongest or the fastest to be the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. You have shown us that your species has turned survival itself into an art form and warfare into a precise science. You have demonstrated that humans spent millions of years being hunted and learning how to turn the tables on their hunters. And that makes us nightmares, Jake said softly. Yes, Vexral agreed. The galaxy enrolled a human in its harshest military school, thinking it would prove human weakness and justify treating your species as junior partners in the coalition. Instead, it revealed something far more disturbing. It revealed that humans have been attending the harshest military school in existence since before your species could even speak. That school is called Earth, and it has forged you into the most dangerous warriors the galaxy has ever encountered. Vexral stood to leave. He paused at the door and looked back. Sleep well, Jake Morrison, because the galaxy will never sleep peacefully again, now that they know what humans are truly capable of. They will always wonder if the humans they see as allies might someday become their enemies. And that fear, that uncertainty, that is perhaps the most powerful weapon you possess. After the commander left, Jake sat alone for a long time, looking out at the distant stars. He thought about Earth, his homeworld. He thought about the countless wars humanity had fought, the terrible price paid for survival, the hard lessons learned through millions of years of struggle. The galaxy had invited humanity to join them because they thought humans were weak and needed protection. They had been completely wrong about that. Humanity did not need protection from the galaxy. The galaxy needed protection from what humanity could become if they were ever threatened. But that was a problem for the future. For now, there was still a war to win against the Krellic Empire, and Jake Morrison had learned long ago, from his mother and father, from his planet's bloody history, from 10,000 years of human warfare, that humans were extraordinarily good at winning wars, even if it made them into nightmares, even if it made other species fear them, even if it changed how the entire galaxy viewed warfare itself, especially then, because at the end of the day, humans were survivors, and survivors did whatever was necessary to survive, no matter the cost, no matter how others judged them, no matter what they had to become. The galaxy had made a simple mistake. They had assumed that physical weakness meant military weakness. They had thought that kindness meant softness. They had believed that a species interested in science and art could not also be masters of warfare. Earth had spent 4 billion years teaching humans that none of those assumptions were true. You could be physically weak and still be deadly. You could value peace and still be expert at war. You could love art and science and still be capable of terrible violence when necessary. The galaxy was learning these lessons now. Learning them the hard way, through practical demonstration on the battlefield. And they were discovering that the small, weak humans from an unremarkable planet were actually the most dangerous military force they had ever encountered, not because humans were strong, but because humans had spent millions of years learning how to defeat enemies who were stronger than them, and they had gotten very, very good at it. The nightmare had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. Been steadily winning the war, was about to face an enemy that fought in ways their warrior culture had never imagined. Jake Morrison stood in his quarters on his last night at the Academy, looking out at the frozen landscape of Keth 7. He thought about everything that had happened. He had come here expecting to fail, expecting to prove that humans were not warriors. Instead, he had proven something far more significant. He had proven that humans were not warriors at all. They were something much more dangerous. They were survivors who had turned survival into an art form and warfare into a precise science. The galaxy had enrolled a human in its harshest military school, thinking it would demonstrate human weakness and justify keeping them as junior members of the coalition. Instead, It had revealed a truth that would change galactic politics forever. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the most advanced. But they were absolutely the most dangerous, because they had spent their entire existence learning how to defeat enemies that were stronger, faster, and better equipped. And now they were teaching those methods to the galaxy, Nesses. And they are learning from us, while we are only beginning to learn from them. I recommend immediate evaluation of the strategic threat that humanity poses to the Coalition and to the Valdrix Empire specifically. He sent the report and sat back in his chair. Through his window, he could see cadets training in the courtyard below. Among them, easy to spot because of his smaller size, was Jake Morrison. The human was helping Kextor practice a new fighting technique. Commander Vexral watched and felt something he had not felt in his 300 years of life. He felt genuine fear. Not fear of death in battle. That was acceptable, and even honorable. He felt fear of the unknown. Fear of fighting an enemy that played by completely different rules. Fear of what humans might become if they were ever united and given a reason to go to war against the galaxy. The Valdrix had ruled through strength for thousands of years. But Jake Morrison had just proven that strength alone was not enough. Intelligence, adaptability, and ruthless efficiency could defeat strength. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson. The lesson that Earth had taught humans over millions of years of brutal survival. The lesson was simple. It does not matter if you are the strongest. What matters is that you are the last one standing when the fight is over. Commander Vexral nodded slowly. Yes, and I am beginning to think that might not be a bad thing. The Krellic Empire has been winning the war against us. Perhaps we need to learn how to fight differently. You want us to learn from a human? Another instructor asked, shocked. I want us to survive, Vexral replied. And if that means learning from a species that has spent its entire existence perfecting the art of survival, then yes, we will learn from the human. Jake Morrison had no idea that his simple approach to tactics was starting a revolution in galactic military thinking. He was just trying to survive each day, using the methods that came naturally to him. Methods that every human understood instinctively because they were born from millions of years of desperate survival on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Earth had forged humans in fire. Now, the galaxy was about to discover what that meant. Why? He had turned the gauntlet into a problem to be solved rather than a test of strength. And that approach, that human way of thinking, was going to change everything at the academy. The other cadets went to their barracks that night talking about what they had seen. Some were impressed. Most were still dismissive. They told themselves it was luck. The human would fail soon enough when the real training began. But Jake Morrison had no intention of failing. He had not come to the galaxy's harshest military school to prove humans were equal to other species. He had come to prove something far more significant. He was here to show the galaxy that humans were not just another warrior race. Humans were something different. Something the galaxy had never encountered before. They were survivors from a death world, and they had spent millions of years learning how to defeat enemies that were bigger, stronger, and faster than them. That knowledge was now walking the halls of the Valdrix Imperial War Academy, and the nightmare was just beginning.